Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. Pleasure to see everybody, and welcome back and to our weekly Parsha Shir. I guess this evening Shir, like this afternoon Shir, really want to thank the Elmans. They sponsored the Shir this afternoon by Rabbi Schwartz and Yom Ha'atzmaut. And this evening they're sponsoring the Shir dedicated by Rabbi Rafael and Sharon Perlauman in memory of Spencer Sharfman, Yeshayahu Oron Zal Ben Shmuel Yair. Whose yahrzeit will be on Shabbat, the 6th of Iyar. Spencer bravely fought a brain tumor for 14 years with exceptional emunah and spirituality. He passed away at the age of 16, unfortunately. He was extremely sensitive to others and was a shining example of kindness and compassion. May his memory be a blessing to his family and all of Klal Yisrael. We should have happy occasions and they come together for good occasions. Thank you, and good memories. And this evening, I want to welcome we've had doing a couple interviews on Torah Motion. Rabbi Mauri Kelman, also known as my younger brother, if I can say that, and is the chairman and founder of Kedma, a Jewish student organization in Israel and the United States. He is now he's been serving for the last number of years of Congregation Agudat Achim in Bradley Beach. In the past, he was only serving in the summer. This year, they asked him to stay all year to get the shul keeping it running, and they can keep it running all through the year. He's doing a very good job at that. He's a founder and director of Route 613, dealing with Geirut, bringing people under the halachic auspices of Judaism, and he's a lawyer and who's worked on Wall Street, and it's a pleasure. Now we got my older sister, my younger brother, and I'm in the middle to welcome Rabbi Mauri. Fakasha, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add also that the neshama should have an aliyah. I also just wanted to begin. I was going to begin on a very happy note, and this being Yom Ha'atzmaut, of course, and hopefully all of you participated. Unfortunately, it's a day that is neglected by many in the Jewish and even observant community. At least not as much as Yom Yerushalayim, but it's a day that is often neglected. So I hope all of you had a chance to celebrate in some way, to say Hallel, to thank God for the incredible miracle, and that actually relates to what we're going to be talking about a little bit in terms of building a society. But unfortunately, we also just got the news of another terror attack. So we hope that those injured will survive, and that those who were killed, that there's neshamat also should have an aliyah, and that there should be no more terror, and that a day like Yom Ha'atzmaut should only be a day of simcha. So with that, as I mentioned, I want to talk. The Parsha of Kedoshim, of course, is so much in it. It's really, one could say, you can say this about any Parsha, of course. Every Parsha is the most important, because if it weren't the most important, God wouldn't have put it in there. But Kedoshim, it just has so many overarching ideas of really just fundamentals of Judaism, and it's really hard. It really demands months and months and months of study. But I want to just try to get across some ideas of what the Parsha is all about, and also again the idea of what it means for us nowadays, whether building a Jewish state in Israel or building a society wherever we are. So I want to start off. We'll just share the Parsha over here. Okay, hopefully, yeah, you can see it. I hope everybody, yeah. Okay, yeah. So the Parsha begins with a very, again, overarching type of idea. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe limor. Daber al kol adat bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem. I guess I should put this in English just to be for those who are Hebrew is not as perfect. So daber bnei Yisrael kol adat bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem kedoshim to you. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. So the beginning of the Parsha begins with something unique. We don't really have this type of introduction anywhere else. Normally, it says, "Vayidaber Hashem," God speaks to Moshe, and he tells him to tell over the mitzvot that he's going to tell them. But we don't have this lashon, this language of daber al kol adat b'nei Yisrael, right? Why are we supposed to speak to the entire Jewish community here? You don't have that language anywhere. So right away, obviously, it's a major question, because the language is very different than other places where God speaks to Moshe, which is throughout the four books of the last four books of the Torah. So if you see, Rashi over here right away says, Melamed shenemra parshazu behakel mipnei sherov gufei Torah tluyim ba. right? So Rashi says that this whole portion, which is basically the portion of Kedoshim that we have in front of us, even though, of course, we know that the Parshat weren't given in the order that we have. Right? When Moshe received the Torah, it wasn't broken up into Parsha Kedoshim. But that's another issue not to deal with right now. But let's just assume all these mitzvot we're going to be reading in this Parsha, they're so important that they had to be said they had to be said in front of the whole Jewish people. Now, again, what we've learned before, what our rabbis tell us, is that generally the way that Moshe taught the Torah was that God taught Moshe, then Moshe would call in Aaron, his brother, he would teach it to him, and then he would sit aside, and then Aaron's two sons would come in, Elazar and Tamar, Moshe would teach it to them, and then they would sit on the other sides of Moshe, and then the elders would come in, Moshe would teach it to them, and then they would sit down, and then the entire Jewish people would come. They'd need a pretty big place of meeting for that, and Moshe would have to have a pretty strong voice to that. But that's what our rabbis tell us, that Moshe, whether by miracle, he was able to he taught the Torah to the Jewish people. So it would turn out Aaron heard it 4 times. Aaron's two sons heard it 3 times. The elders heard it twice, and the Jewish people heard the teachings once. So the question arises, why, if this is, why the change here? Yes, as Rashi says, there are many fundamentals of the Torah in this parsha that we're having here, but still, we have other important portions, right? We have throughout the Torah, we have other important places. So why specifically these mitzvot were they said to the entire people? So the various Mefarshim, the various commentaries try to figure this out. So you have, you can read it inside also. We'll just turn to the Mizrahi over here. The Mizrahi tells us, that right? Mizrahi, there are many commentators on Rashi himself and who try to explain what Rashi is saying here. So the Mizrahi says, "V'tzarich liyot kulam yachad," that they all had to be together for these specific commandments. She'im yipol liksatam shum safek balacha yu acharim mishivim lo kach v'kach amar bifnechem. So if there was some sort of debate afterwards, or some people said, no, that's not what Moshe taught us. That's not what he said to us. Then they would be able to say, no, we were all together here. That's not, you're saying that Moshe said this. No, we were all together at once. We all heard it together. That's not what he said. That's not, you're getting it wrong. If they would come in one after the other, one group couldn't tell the other group, no, that's not what I heard, because you don't know what they heard. They heard it a different time. Maybe Moshe said something different. Who knows? So that's what the Mizrahi says. What he says here. It's in order to ensure that all the people would hear it together. These are such important mitzvot. They would all be able to hear it together, and nobody can complain afterwards, or nobody can claim afterwards something else, because everybody heard it together, and there'd be an exact record, as it were, of what Moshe said. Again, this also raises different questions. When was the Torah was? Therefore, at this stage, it wasn't written. Clearly, Moshe was teaching it to them, but leave that aside right now. Clearly, this the idea that Mizrahi is telling us is that it was meant to make sure there was no confusion, because these mitzvot are so important, and therefore there couldn't be any type of confusion. I saw in Rabbi Shmuel Golden has a very nice sefer on the Torah. So he quotes from a Rav, the Korban Aharon, a medieval commentator, who says that specifically when it came to these mitzvot, everyone had to be together. Why? Because what's the mitzvah here? Kedoshim tiyu. When we're going to get to what that means exactly. What does it mean to be kadosh? And there's a lot of talk about kedusha. What exactly is kedusha? But we'll get to that in a moment. But so he points, this Korban Aharon says that because the mitzvah here is this overarching idea of being kadosh, holy, sacred, again, without defining exactly what that means. Everyone had to be together to teach people that they could all reach the level of kedusha. Normally, and I'm sort of adding my own to this also now. Some people would say, you know what, I can't be as holy as somebody else, right? I wasn't born to the right family. I wasn't given the proper type of education. I can't be as kadosh as everybody else. And the idea is that no, everyone came together. Everybody heard this together with the whole idea that all people can become kadosh. Yes, there are different people. Different people have different intellectual abilities. Different people have different educational abilities as well that allow people to do X and Y. But when it comes to the idea of kedusha, there's what this commentary is telling us is that we all are able to strive to the level of kedusha, and just to really sort of to take this in a slightly different area as well. What I think we could add to this is that we have other parshiot, we have other portions in the Torah where we have a lot of mitzvot. For example, if you read already through these mitzvot of Kedoshim, what other parsha does it remind you of? At least one other parsha might it remind you of. What other portion in the Torah? If you look at all these different mitzvot, and this has a lot of the mitzvot, I think it might be the fourth biggest parsha with mitzvot. What does it remind you of?
Mishpatim.
Mishpatim, yeah, that would probably be the first one. You could say Kitetse maybe, but definitely
Mishpatim or Kitetse.
Right. Yeah. So, but definitely mishpatim. Right. If you look back in the parsha that comes right after the Jewish people get the Torah, also we have a whole series of mitzvot, most of them dealing with interpersonal relationships. We're going to see now also in this parsha we have a combination of both interpersonal and mitzvot between man and God, but also that definitely has a lot of important mitzvot there. So why wasn't that said together? So I think the answer, again, just to take this to the next level, really is that it doesn't have the mention really of the idea of kedoshim to you. This is the one place in the Torah where there's an absolute mandate to the Jewish people to be holy, to be kadosh. And again, we'll define that. We'll try to define that a little bit in a moment. And the idea being also that this is, just in terms of the context of where we are. So again, just to give it a little chronology. The Jewish people were now assuming, without getting into the questions of when does each parsha come chronologically, but generally speaking, there's no reason to think this would have been out of order, right? Unless even those who say that the Torah sometimes can be out of order, that's only if there's a compelling reason to say so. But it would seem this would be in the right order. So what's happening right now? So we just had a good part of the book of Vayikra, which of course deals with rituals. It's ritual after ritual, mostly having to do with the Beit HaMikdash, with the temple, with Kiddusha, with the Kohen. The word Kadosh over and over and over again, tens and tens of different times the word Kadosh is mentioned in this whole book. And when is this book said? This book, in the chronology, the Jewish people, they leave Egypt. We just celebrated that, of course. We leave Egypt and then we come to Mount Sinai, which we're looking forward to. If you haven't come to the Omer yet, you can do that now also. And then they come to Mount Sinai, and we have the whole series of events there, the sin, back and forth, Yom Kippur, the Jewish people are forgiven. And then what happens right after Yom Kippur, the Jewish people begin to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. There's a little dispute among rabbis when exactly they finished it, either on Kafei Kislev, right? Coincidental. They finished it on what becomes Hanukkah later on, or they finished it later, a little closer. According to the first version, they waited around a few months until the inaugurations took place at the end, the 7 days, and then the inauguration at the beginning of Nisan, or they finished it closer to Nisan. And presumably it was at this time that they still stayed for another little over a month they're at Mount Sinai this whole time. They haven't moved, right? And they're expecting now to go to Israel. They're taught all of these teachings here. So this parsha, this whole portion here, relating to so many of these fundamental mitzvot, presumably was taught just before the Jewish people were about to enter the land of Israel, right? because they start moving in ER in the next month. Then they send the Meraglim, and the Meraglim were supposed to. I mean, they were supposed to just enter directly, and then whoever's initiative it was to send the Meraglim, which is a whole other question as well. They send the Meraglim, and we know what happens. But if the Meraglim had not been sent, the Jews were so close to Israel, they were going to enter it. So based on this, what I would say is that the reason they had to come together is because we're really just on the precipice now of entering the land of Israel, according to what would have been according to plan. And we know that the land of Israel itself is a place of Kedusha, of tremendous Kedusha. We know that. We just read it in last week's Parsha, and we're going to read it again at the end of this portion. The Torah tells us at the end of Achremot, the Torah says over and over again, it says a couple times that the land will vomit you out if you bring tum'ah. And that's also, we'll hopefully speak about this a little bit as well, the difference between tum'ah, impurity, purity, and tara and kedusha, right? What's the difference between kedusha and tahara? But so there's emphasis at the end of last week's portion about the sanctity of the land of Israel, and the idea that if you don't act in a proper way, in a moral way, what the Torah defines as moral, as we'll see in a moment, that relates to kedusha as well. What does it mean to be a moral people? It's going to spit you out. So I think it would make sense then that after we've had this whole, at the end of last week's portion, this preparation for the land of Israel, because again, they're on the precipice of entering the land of Israel. And we've talked about the Kedusha, the sanctity of the land of Israel. So now God turns to them and says, you are all Kadosh. You are all of you should strive to be Kadosh. And because it's the importance of this, it makes sense that they all had to come together. The point being that by standing together and seeing and hearing this together, it would really make a tremendous impression, as opposed to other mitzvot where they heard it, the fourth time, one after the other. This, everybody comes together in one fell swoop, and they're standing all together, and Moshe tells them from God, you are mandated to be a Kadosh people. I think that the idea would have given them a greater motivation. It should have given them greater motivation to just jump in. We can't wait to go to Israel. It didn't work out that way, unfortunately. But that perhaps is another take on why they came all together as opposed to going to the regular retinue. So what does it mean to be Kadosh? So we have the famous commentary of Rashi over here, who quotes from the Talmud, of course. So what does he say? Kedoshim to you, have a prushim. I think there's also in English, so we'll now I lost the Hebrew. Hold on. Have a prushim mina arayat u mina avera. Shekol makom she'atamot together erva tamot kedusha. Etc. So Rashi says, quotes the Talmud, that what does it mean, kadosh? It means to be separate when it comes to issues of sexuality that we know. We just finished reading at the end of last week's portion, and we're going to read similar prohibitions in this week's portion as well. The importance of not being like the Egyptian people, the Jewish people coming from Egypt, where it was a pagan society, and there was no, and we know in general in ancient history, the idea of relationships was an animalistic type of idea, that people took the women were low down, and they were degraded, and men could, especially men in power and money, could just take anybody, and there was no sense of propriety. But we think of that. The Torah is a tremendous revolution and says no, there have to be consensual relationships, and only with specific people, and that's the idea of coming to Kedusha. We know the same thing with the Jewish people when they're told, we'll be reading this in about a month and a half, I guess, or so in Balotcha, when they're told that they have to have their window, the commentaries that they would face that when they were that's Matobo Alech, I'm just thinking of something else, but when they were told they have to separate the mishpachot, they have to, that was, some of the people there complained about that because they weren't used to that. They were used in Egypt to doing anything they wanted when it came to relationships, and they cried over it, and of course it took a while, and it's still taking a while. It's an age-old challenge to come to this level of kedusha, of knowing that Marriage is sanctified. That's why it's called kiddushin, of course, right? Kiddushin and Eruv, that's the way we come together. We choose one person from the entire world. You could choose anybody in the world to get married to. And we choose this person. That's what makes the kedusha. And of course, that's why the Rambam Maimonides, in his laws of kedusha, he includes kashrut. He includes the laws of marriage as well, of relationships, because these are two types of areas where we could just let our animalistic urges go. We want to eat something, we just take it. We're not looking at if it's kosher. We don't make a bracha. No, the Torah tells us, be kadosh. Overcome these animalistic urges, and the same thing when it comes to forbidden relationships as well. So that's so this is very much one of the ideas of kedusha. But in terms of, I mentioned before, we have a major emphasis in last week's parsha on tum'ah and tara, and the previous parshot. If we forget before Pesach what we're reading. So first of all, I just want to go back to Shmini. If you look in Shmini, let me just do it here. Hold on, we can see as well, because this should also remind us of the beginning of this week's portion. So if you look at the end of Shmini, this is all in. Okay, so basically at the end of the portion of Shmini, we also have very similar language to what we have here. Okay, so if you look at the end, so what do we see here? So first of all, we're told about the laws of kashrut, exactly what I just mentioned now, right? The way the Rambam orders it. What makes us kadosh? What makes us what we call holy or sacred? Refraining from certain types of food, and also refraining from certain relationships, of course, and only being in a marriage relationship, of course. Okay, so the Torah tells us that all of these creepy things, you can't eat them. Al tishaksu et nafshatochem. You will don't make your body disgusting, degraded. V'lo titamu mehem v'nit metem bam. Because if you eat these types of creepy types of things, you will become tameh. You will become impure. And then what's the next verse? Ki ani Hashem Elokechem v'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. V'yitkadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. Has this dual language, which Chazal, our rabbis say, actually is a reference to what? Who knows? What do our rabbis say this relates to? It's a certain ritual that we do. So our Talmud tells us, "V'hi kadishtem elu mayim rishonim, v'yitem kedoshim elu mayim achronim." Right. This is a reference to that we have to be in a sense of cleanliness, of purity when we eat. And after we eat as well, right? That's another reason, according to this, that it's also a neglected mitzvah of mayim achronim, of washing our hands before we bench. The idea that it elevates us in kedusha. And you have this language on ki kadosh ani. So I'll give you the spoiler, right there, unless somebody knows here before I have to say it, right? So you have this language of v'item kedoshim ki kadosh ani. You should be kadosh because I am kadosh, right? God is saying here. Where else do we have that language? We just saw it in the first verse in Kedoshim. Anybody want to guess, at least, unless you know, how many times this language occurs in the Torah? That God says, I am kadosh. I am holy, sacred, etc. Anyone want to venture a guess? No? Okay, so it occurs 4 times. We have this language. Okay, so I just want to finish off the end of Kedoshim because it's somewhat similar, quite similar to the language that we have in our own portion as well. So again, you should be kadosh again, and the dual language, kadishtem v'item kedoshim, right? That's why the rabbis saw they had to interpret it that it's adding something new, right? One is mayim rishonim, one is mayim achronim, because what else it seems superfluous. V'hit kadishtem v'yitem kedoshim. You should be. What does the English here say? You shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, right? But obviously in the English, you don't really get any resonance that there's any difference. And that's the question. What's the difference here? But ki kadoshani, the reason for this is that, and this fits into a general idea we have in the Torah, of course, which is v'halachta bidrachav. God says it outright. It says it later in the Torah, and he says it right here that we have to follow God, right? We should be like God. What we say in the fancy Latin, imitatio Dei, right? We should imitate God. I am kadosh, and therefore you should be kadosh. The way that God acts, that's the way we're supposed to act. And again, again, you have this, it seems to here to be the opposite, right? You should be kadosh, you should be sacred, holy, velo tetamu, and do not make yourselves impure through eating these different things. Ki ani Hashem hamaledchem eretz Yisrael. Again, this occurs throughout in many places of the Torah. Again, we had at the end of last week's portion, as I just mentioned, the identification of Egypt with tum'ah. It's an impure land, and of course, this is probably it's the challenge of the Torah, of the whole journey, is to remove themselves from Egypt. They remove themselves physically, but can they remove themselves spiritually from Egypt? And the answer, unfortunately, is not so well, right? Because that's a theme that we have throughout in Bamidbar as well. We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt. It was very hard to leave that, so the Torah has to try to negate that, and on the one hand, you've got the Kedusha, the sanctity, the Jewish people, Israel, and then do not become impure because I brought you out of Egypt in order that you should create a new people. V'yitem kedoshim, again, then another, the ki kadosh ani, again, twice you have it here. V'yitem kedoshim ki kadosh ani, okay. So the Torah is clearly, again, we could find different explanations for each usage, but just on a simple level, it's very obvious that the idea of Kiddusha is such a fundamental part of what the Torah is striving for us and as the Jewish people, to be an Am Kadosh, V'atem te'elu Mamlechet Kohanim V'Am Kadosh, right? We're Goy Kadosh. This is the ethos of the Jewish people. This is the aspiration of the Jewish people to rise to the level of Kiddusha. But it's in this Arbig's Parsha, just to go back, it's in Arbig's Parsha that we have the specific idea that all of you, very specifically, I mean, we have it here as well, but very specifically, as our commentators, as we just saw now, point out, it's this was a magnified order, a magnified mitzvah, Kedoshim Tiyu, right? We had the references before, but this is outright Kedoshim. You have to be Kadosh. So as I mentioned, so what is the difference between Kedusha and Tahara? So you can take different approaches. I want to quote one of my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, the great Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein. Sorry, shouldn't be ringing. Okay. And so he points out, based on his reading in the Rambam, but the difference between Kedusha and Tahara is that, and he bases this, you can see this also in the three different machanot, the three different camps that we had among the Jewish people. You had the Machane Yisrael, the Leviim, right, the Levites, and then the Machane Shechina, right, where God really was. In the Machane Yisrael, as long as if you were tahor, you could be there. So what went on in the main encampment as the Jewish people were traveling through the desert? Every mundane things, right? They did mundane day-to-day things. That's what they're doing. So tahor, the idea of tahara, which as long as you were tahor, and again, it's not the idea of being tameh also. And this, sometimes people have a misunderstanding of this. It's not a punishment. It's not an indictment, right? You can be a great person. You come in contact with a dead person or some other deaths. You're in a state of tumah. So you're not a bad person, right? See, sometimes you can do things, right? You speak lashon hara, the Parshat of Tazria and Mitzora, that's something different. But by itself, being in a state of tumah is not an indictment. It just means that you can't go around your day-to-day activities, because to be tahor just means you living in the day-to-day world. Kedusha, according to Lichtenstein, is really coming to a higher level. It's going beyond the day-to-day. It's really trying to to rise to ethereal levels, obviously while being in this world, but it's on a higher level even than Tara. So you can argue with this, reject this. I just want to at least throw out one possibility to try to understand, and you have to follow it through. Again, there's so many different references to Kedusha and Tara, but I think it works. So, and obviously I have nothing to say about Lichtenstein. So, but in terms of if he said that, then obviously he was one of the great Gedolim of our generation. So, so just to continue a little further on in terms of this idea of Kedusha yeah, so we'll save that to the end because I want to come back to it. As I mentioned, we have we have two other references to Ki Kadosh Ani, so we'll save that to the end. We'll try to sum up with that. But I just want to go through some of the verses here as well. Obviously, we can't go through too many, and one of the main questions as we go through is if you've learned already the Parsha already, and this is not a simple question, is what is the connection between all of these different verses? So I just want to give a quick glance at them. Just to enumerate what we're talking about, and then try to give a little bit of a structure and understanding to what is going on here and what the Torah is trying to do here, what God wants to do for us here. So we start off after this general mitzvah of being kadosh, the entire Jewish people. Ish imo v'aviv tirau bet shabtatai timor. Then we have what? We have the idea of not kibud aveim, which we had in the Aseret HaDibrot, right, of honoring our parents. But here we have the idea of being in awe. I don't like, what does it say here? It says revere. Yeah, revere is good. Awe or revere. It's not really fear. It's the idea that, the same way that, and you see this from the end of the pasuk, which is Ani Hashem Elokechem. You see the Torah and the Talmud does this very specifically in Tractate Kiddushin, where it says that there are three partners in every person, the parents and God. So the Torah clearly makes a comparison between God and our parents. And on a simple level, that just means we should be in awe of our parents, the same way that we're in awe of God. God gives all of us life, and our parents give each individual life. So we have to be in awe of God. So of course, we have to be in awe of our parents. And that, of course, colors our entire relationship with our parents, and so the reason why it's maybe the most difficult mitzvah in the entire Torah. I mean, there are a lot of candidates for that, of course, but if you've learned the Gemara and Kiddushin at the end of the first parak, where it goes through the various Tanaim and Amorim, the great Talmudic sages, and what they would do to try to do this mitzvah, which again, it's both kavod, it's both doing positive things for our parents and also the revering and being in awe, making sure that we never disrespect our parents, we don't sit in their seats, we don't call them by their first names, all the different things that go into it. And of course, they took it to the nth degree. You have stories there of one rabbi, he would literally get on all fours, so he would walk, he would put his hand down so his mother wouldn't have to touch the ground. So a very, very difficult mitzvah, but all those stories make sense if we treat our parents like we treat God, basically. I mean, it's hard to do that exactly the same, and shouldn't be exact this. I'll quote also, just I was mentioning Rav Lichtenstein. This is from many years ago. He talked about, he quoted C.S. Lewis, the great Christian theologian, that our relationship with God is similar. It's a melange, really. It's a combination, really, of the way we relate to parents and grandparents, right? Because our parents, our relationship with our parents, it has love, it has awe, right? It has both of them, and sometimes fear. And especially when we're little, we should have a certain fear, like the fear of God. And but a grandparent's relationship is really one of love, right? Grandparents aren't really there to discipline. Sometimes they may have to, but that's not their role. Is really to. So that's our God is both our parents and our grandparents. That's just a little bit of an aside here. But so you have here right away, you've got the honor, being in awe of our parents. And what does that have to do with Shabbos? Why do you have Shabbos right here? What's the connection with Shabbos? So again, I'm not sure. I'm happy to have more interaction. So, or I can just speak. But whatever the case is, feel free to pop up and obviously ask any questions, etc. Or if you want to answer that, also.
They're right. Yeah, excuse me, Rabbi. They are right together on the luchot.
Exactly. Okay, excellent, right? So you already, there's a precedent for it, but here then the same pasuk. They're clearly different mitzvot, but here you've got it, right together in the same pasuk. So there's, and we also know that the Torah, from the end of Vayakel and Pekude, we know that the Torah also compares what? It compares Shabbos to the Mikdash, and also there talks about Umikdashi Tira'u, right? Talks about the idea of having awe of the Beit HaMikdash. So you've got this sort of tripartite ideas in Judaism: our parents, Shabbos, and the Mikdash. So, and I think what we can learn from this also, and I think Rav Hirsch may have said that, I've seen this somewhere, I don't remember now exactly where, but the idea that it's Shabbos is, we know clearly there's a mitzvah to, the Torah says point blank, there's a mitzvah to be in awe of the mikdash, right? That's why we don't go into the Beit HaMikdash with certain types of clothes and our makel, or things that are more pedestrian. And the same thing, because our Batei Knesset, our synagogues are supposed to be mikdashei me'at, they're supposed to be miniature temples. We have to revere them, and people often forget that also. There are all types of halachot, which we're not going to get into, that relate to how we act in the shul, and it's a lot. We learn that from the temple. But you also see, again, I'm not sure whether it was Rav Hirsch or somebody says that you're supposed to be in awe of Shabbos, right? The same thing, that we should sit back every Shabbos and just be in awe of it. What an amazing gift that God's given to us, that we have this one day where we can just come together and think, and all the things that Shabbos is all about. So that's just a nice idea, I think, as well, the connection between our parents, Shabbos, and also the Beit HaMikdash in terms of being revering. So that we come to the next basically 6 psukim are again, we're not going to spend too much time on them, but it's a question is, why are they right here? So again, the first pasuk may make a little bit more sense. Well, I'll give part of the answer before. So as we read along this, you can also see with your own eyes how these things work out. So there's a famous midrash in the Vayikra Rabbah, I think the 25th chapter in Vayikra Rabbah, where Rabbi says that, and he is commenting really on the Daber al kol adab bnei Yisrael, the idea again that this was said to the entirety of the Jewish people, that these mitzvot and kadoshim, you can relate them, each of them has a source, or they're all connected somehow to the Aseret HaDibrot, right? So the first two are obvious, right? The first two are very obvious, right? We have our parents, we have Shabbos, and then the next one as well, right? We have a very strict prohibition against avodah zara. So right away, we see that there are at least 3 mitzvot on the Aseret Dibur right away. But again, we're not going to. They're charts. We can go through them. We're not going to do that right now. But you can try on your own, and we'll point out a few more now as we go through them. But you can find evidence throughout Kedoshim for the 10 Dibrot, for the Aseret HaDibrot as well. So that's another reason why, of course, so in that sense, it's similar to the way the Aseret HaDibrot were given at Mount Sinai. The entire Jewish people, as you may recall, the first 2 mitzvot, we're told, were said by God directly. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? John was speaking to the Jewish people. He speaks in first person. I'm speaking to you, and the entire Jewish people are hearing it directly from God. And then, of course, the Talmud tells us the Jewish people come to Moshe. It's too much, that's the way we are, and I think it's a contemporary lesson for us as well, right? Some of us, where's God? Why doesn't God speak to us? I think if he came, we would say, oh, it's a little too much. But we know God leaves us all types of signs on a constant level of where he is. It's very clear. So that's one idea here, and that would fit in then. If we have these Aseret HaDibrot within Kedoshim, then it makes sense we follow up with avodah zarah. But let me ask you a question based on this, which is, if that's the case, right? If we take this midrash seriously, which of course we do, why does it start off with our parents? Our parents are the 5th commandment, right? Why do their parents come first here?
Because we can learn how to have awe of Hashem by first learning how to react to our parents, who are creators with a little c. God is the creator with the capital C.
Okay, Okay, so Rav Hirsch talks about Nechama Leibowitz has one of her her Gilyonotis about this as well. The idea that that basically our parents are the ones that really teach us everything. They're basically, I think, what you're saying, Ruth. God is, yes, God, on an aspirational level or on a conceptual level, God comes first. Yes, without God, nothing's going to be there. But on an educational level, you're going to teach a 3-year-old kid about God. You're going to teach a 7-year-old kid, or you're going to teach sometimes a 47-year-old kid about God. It's a little more difficult. But our parents, we understand. Our parents who give us everything, who can explain to us, and we see it. We see the connection. We see the transmission. We see that makes a lot more sense. So in a sense, then the Har Sinai was again, we could call this the conceptual sort of. The conceptual commandments, the 10 commandments, the fundamentals, and Kedoshim in terms of that is more the educational. And again, as I think, if you conceive of this as this was given on the doorstep of their supposed entering to Israel, it would make sense then that, now we really have to teach the Jewish people. The Jewish people have to really understand what it's all about. So we're going to start with the parents, who are the transmitters really of everything. So, okay, so just picking up after that understanding of the first of the 3 of these 10 commandments, as it were, then we come to the next 5 psukim are all about basically the proper way to give a sacrifice. It can't be a pigul, right? A pigul means if we're not allowed to eat it after 2 days, and if we do, as the Torah says, then it's you will get karet, you will be cut off from the Jewish people. So we have this little bit of it seems like a little bit of a detour perhaps, to talk about the importance of the way we sacrifice things. But I think, again, one answer, and if anybody has something else you want to add here, that'd be great. I think one answer for this is the whole Parsha, and all these are really about being kadosh. And we just saw before, kadosh means to be parush. It means to, I didn't even quote the most famous, of course, explanation. I have to say it at least, or at least reference it. You can't learn Parsha Kedoshim without referencing the Ramban, the famous Ramban, that a person can be a naval b'rshut Torah, that a person can follow the letter of the law to the Torah, and but he can be a naval. He can be basically the simplest way of understanding is kind of a disgusting person. He can spend his whole life really just not doing anything of substance. He follows the letter of the law, and the idea, very similar. The idea of kedusha is not only to follow the letter of the law, to separate from ourselves things that we should be okay, whether it's I could watch TV for 6 hours a day, I could binge watch this and that, but I'm not going to do that because I have more important. I want to learn Torah. I want to go to Minyan. I want to whatever thing. I want to help an elderly person. I want to be involved with Israel more. Whatever the case is. So that's clearly an important. We should mention that because that's really, again, extremely important for Ramban. If you've never read it before, I encourage you to read it inside. But basically, the idea of a korban, also the korban is an idea of being of kadosh. Again, without going into, there are different types of korbanot, of course, but the korban, the root of the word korban is to get closer to God, and we give of ourselves, right? That's what the English word is actually. This is a good translation, right? Many translations don't really capture the essence of a word in any language, but the idea of sacrifice, I think, resonates what korban is all about. We're taking something of ourselves, we sacrifice something, and that's what kedusha is all about. That we take of ourselves, we take money from ourselves, we take time, we take everything, and we're giving it. And this, by the way, this is obviously a mitzvah ben adam lamakom, right? We started off with our parents, and then Shabbos, which is called Shabbos really both ways, and then we go into Avodah Zarah. The next 6 psukim all relate to mitzvot that are ben adam lemakom, right? That all relate to our relationship with God. So again, this idea of a sacrifice is also a way to become kadosh. And then we have the laws of what we call matanot levyonim. There are 5 different laws. We have 4 of them right here, right? What's the one that's missing? We don't have shichacha here, right? When we forget something, some bushels in the field, we're not allowed to go back. We have to leave it. But we have here the idea of peah, of leaving a corner of our field for the poor people. We have leket, olelot. We have that relates to leaving a little bit of the grape from the grape. What's it called? From the grapevine. So we have 4 of the mitzvot that are over here from the Matanot Levinim. And why are they over here? And we say here again, and this comes up later on in the Parsha, which we're not going to get to, when we say that we are not supposed to cut down we're not supposed to take when we are harvesting and something drops and we don't it falls down, we're not allowed to pick that up. We have to leave it to the ani v'lager, right? So now we're we've moved back into ben adam. We're moving back into ben adam lemakom, right? These are mitzvot that have to do with our interpersonal relationships, and you see right away, and this is the ethos of the Torah as well. What does it say? We have to be kadosh means to not just to think of ourselves and how we can get closer to God, right? Because that is, we know one of the challenges in developing a religious personality is that we can get caught up with ourselves. We can, I can spend my whole day and hitbodedut. I can just go into seclusion, but that's not what Judaism wants from us. What Judaism wants us to make sure that we're living in a proper society where the ani and the ger, right, the two of the people who can often be neglected. A poor person obviously doesn't have much, and then the ger, the convert, the stranger. Again, both there we have both ideas within the ger. Like it can be literally a convert, but also a stranger, somebody who comes.
Rabbi.
Pardon?
Rabbi, I think that those rules, really, what we're talking about in Parshat Kedoshim, are also practical.
Practical?
They are practical and they are real. They are not just theory. They're actually practical.
Yeah.
From the beginning to the end.
Right. Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's a perfect point. Right. It's about, that's why I don't know if that's why I call this little talk was about building how to build a holy society, really. And this is part of it, right? We have the famous statement of the Maimonides, which we should read every Chag, that that happiness is not just about eating yourself, it's about inviting other people in, the people who are most neglected. This is exactly what the Torah says here, right? Exactly. And Ani Hashem Elokechem, again, we have this over and over again. In this parsha, we have constant references to Ani Hashem Elokechem, Ani Hashem, right? It says either Ani Hashem or Ani Hashem Elokechem. And again, we don't have time to go through why every one of them is in each way. We can categorize them, but here again, God is watching us in this. I mean, on a simple level, that God is watching what we're doing, and we have to strive to be like God. We just heard it. Ki kadosh ani. We saw it in Parshat Shmini, right? Twice ki kadosh ani. Here again, v'yitem kadoshim ki kadosh ani. So we have to strive, and how do we do that? Again, by giving by having matanot avinu, and that, of course, and that also. So why do we? The question was asked. It has been asked by many of the commentaries. Why don't we just? Why doesn't the Torah just say give tzedakah? Right? Why do we have these 5 different types of gifts for the poor people that come into our land and take it? Why Torah could just say you have to give 10%? You have to, which is what we generally learn. But why doesn't Torah say that? Right? You give 10% of your. Pardon?
We need ourselves to try.
Excellent. Okay, so that's on the aniyim side, right? At the end, and also sort of a sense of
also for the gerim.
Pardon?
But also for the ger should be shadlut. Right.
No, exactly. Yeah. So that's a very good point. Exactly. That and it's also a sense of dignity, for them. So I think you have to look at
100%. Not to depend on society and the community by itself. You should try to do by yourself.
Right. So I think that's similar. You have stores where they sell clothes for very cheap. So a person that doesn't feel they're paying for it. They're not just getting things. And here, what the Torah is saying, and it relates, of course, to the year that we're in right now, the Shnat HaShmitah, is that it's their land, right? It's their land. It's for them, and like you said, they have to come and pick it up. They have to do hishtadlut, and also, of course, and it serves to remind the owner that it's not their land totally. That they also, don't get, again. That's the way you become kadosh. If you own everything, right? If it's all yours, it's harder to become kadosh. But if you know, if you're a landowner, you know that there's certain things that it's not mine, that helps you also approach the idea of kedusha. Okay, I just want to skip a little bit because we don't have so much time left. So again, we have now the next few psukim again, and this also you can see the direct reference to the Aseret HaDibrot, the idea of lo titnovu, right? So lo titrakru ish b'mito, right? Lo tanevarecha et shaker. We're not supposed to give false testimony. So you see, it's pretty apparent, right? Once if you hadn't heard that before, if you had heard it before, when you look inside, it jumps out to you that you've got the very clear references to the Aseret HaDibrot here. So again, how we have to. We can't take from other people. It's building an ethical society. It's building a society where we, and it's going to culminate, of course, with the famous 3 words we'll get to in a moment. So lo tigzol, lo talim pilatzachir, right? The idea of paying people on time, which there are many, of course. The Gemara goes into that in great detail as well, what that means and the seriousness of this, to make sure that you pay a person, especially a person who is a schir yom, a person who only gets paid on a daily basis. You have to make sure that, right? Doesn't mean, right, first, people in our society, people get paid a couple of weeks or a month, as long as that's the contract. That's okay. You don't have to. That's not lo talim. That's not defaulting or delaying. But a person who looks every day to get paid, you can't. That's a big problem. Okay, we have the famous psukim here, which I'll just ask the question, because which is lo tegalach haresh lifnei ver lo titen michshol. So our rabbis, as you know, the Torah seems pretty clear. It's talking about people with disabilities, right? People who are literally deaf or blind, and that you cannot. The question is that they seem to be a little disparate in terms of what's the idea of insulting, cursing a deaf person, as opposed to putting a stumbling block before a blind person, right? If you put a stumbling block before a blind, he's going to physically fall down. If you curse a deaf person, I mean, just on a very simple physical level, he's not going to hear it. So I'm going to leave that as a question. Like, what exactly, how do these, what's the connection between cursing a deaf person and putting literally a block before, an obstacle before a blind person? But we know famously our rabbis expand upon this verse and say that lifnei iver also is a reference to not helping a Jew sin in any sort of way, right? In any way, we're not supposed to help a Jew to sin. How do they learn that from this? Why do they widen it? Why do we have this tradition that it's not just literally putting an obstacle before a blind person? They actually had a nice, if you didn't watch the Chidon Tanakh there, I just watched a little bit of it. They had a nice segment on it was a Druze community center where they like a blind Druze girl, I actually didn't hear everything of it. I was doing a couple of things, but it was a beautiful little segment in the Chidon Tanakh. If you're not familiar with Chidon Tanakh, is a wonderful international Bible contest that is the culmination is in Yerushalayim on Yom Ha'atzmaut. So it's a great thing to watch, to be inspired by. So yeah, they had this segment about blind Druze community. So I was thinking about that. Yes.
Just to try to answer, try to parallel this pasuk, Lo tchalel charesh, to the pasuk before it, Lo tashok et re'echa. When you oshek at your friend, he doesn't know about that, right? The same thing, Lo tchalel charesh. When you do this, the deaf cannot hear, but that's why it finishes. V'yareta milokecha ki ani Hashem. Hashem is the guy who watches us.
Right. So that's correct. Okay. So, yeah. No. So that's yeah. I was asking. I think you're correct. I was asking though the parallelism between the deaf person and the blind person. But in terms of the end of the pasuk, yes, that's a Rashi and others point out. Ani Hashem. These are certain things, as you pointed out, that only you know, right? That's one of the answers between why sometimes it says Ani Hashem Elokechem, Ani Hashem. Ani Hashem generally is said when it's something that other people wouldn't know about. It's basically God saying, I see it. You think you're going to get away? Ani Hashem. I know what you're thinking. I know what you don't try to fool me. So that's a yes. So that definitely fits into here. Okay, so I just really want to skip because it's to the culmination of this. We don't have time to really go into every single, like I said, the Kedoshim you can learn for months and months and months and months. So every word, every 3 words is another incredibly important foundation of Judaism. Again, the importance of judging fairly, of not being favoritism. We know how much the halacha goes into that. A judge is supposed to recuse himself. If he says good morning to one of the litigants, he's supposed to know, because maybe it looks like he might be showing favor to one of the others. Here's recusing. So we're so precise on, again, the halacha, when it takes these, it really fleshes out the meaning of these verses. It's beautiful. So again, we know we have different types of gossip. Like we have motzi shemra, which is making up things, and we have lashon hora itself, which is true things but to hurt people, and rechilut, which is, again, we don't have time to really go into gossip, any sort of gossip also that could hurt somebody. We lo tamor al tam re'echa, right? We know also there are all types of different understandings for that, but I was just listening just very quickly. This is very relevant for I think our relationship with Israel. And Rav Soloveitchik, a number of years ago, not many years, 1956, I think, he gave a lecture on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and he lamented that he felt maybe even that he didn't do enough for the Holocaust, and he felt, he definitely indicted the Jewish community, the American Jewish community, for not doing enough about the Holocaust based on this verse, Lo tamar al dam re'echa. You can't stand idly by when somebody is in danger, and that's one of the reasons Rav Soloveitchik felt that after the Holocaust, Rav Soloveitchik famously, the response to tragedy, and of course relating to the Holocaust and other tragedies, is not necessarily there's time people want to go into intellectual reasons and try to give this or that, but Rav Soloveitchik felt that's not the best response. The best response is not why, but what. And what do we do now after a tragedy happens? And that's why he felt that after the Holocaust, as opposed to, we have our Toronto connection, the professor Emil Fackenheim, who said that the 614th mitzvah is not to give the Nazis a eponymous victory. Rav Soloveitchik, he said that after our major activity after the response to the Holocaust is to support Israel, to really everything that we can do for Israel. So as we stand on the after Yom Ha'atzmaut, we should keep that in mind as well. Okay, so just coming to the end, the last 2 things I want to really point out is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and then go to the end of the Parsha, where again we have this ideas of kedusha there. So after all of these different, these are all the interpersonal ideas here. Again, not gossiping, not standing idly by, not hating people, which is one of we know the Gemara says it's basically impossible to do, to give reproof. And it's better, because we don't know how to do it, it's better not to do that. It's better not to tell people what you're doing is wrong. Be a role model. That's the way we do hochacha. We do the right thing, and and as Rav, why am I forgetting? Rav, great Mussar Rav, the great Rav Yisrael Salanter. Rav Yisrael Salanter famously said, we need to be more concerned about other people's gashmiut than our own ruchniut, right? We should be concerned about other people's physicality and our own spirituality. Generally, though, what do we do? And we all, I can speak for myself also. We've all been, I've been guilty of this. Sometimes you're worried about other people's spirituality and your own physicality. So we have to turn that around. And so that's, we don't really have hochacha now. And then, of course, lo tikom v'lo titor. As Rashi quotes from the Gemara, again, the difference between lo tikom, to take nekama, means if somebody does something to you, then when you have the opportunity to give him something, you say, no, I'm not going to give it to you because you didn't give it to me, as opposed to nitira, which is to say that I'm good. You asked me for it. In Rashi's example, the kardoma, that you asked me for some sort of shovel or something, and I say that then, and I asked you for that. You said no. And then they later you come to me and say, can I use your broom? And I say, I'm going to give it to you because I'm not like you. I'm better than you. You didn't give it to me. That's the tier as well. Okay. So what do we have at the end? The culmination, it seems, of this, right? So it always bothers me always that, the King James version, which has become the sort of defining definition of this, which is love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Which of course is a very difficult thing, and it's basically impossible. And if this were the translation, it also wouldn't make sense that we know there are, I believe, 5 different options among our rabbis or Tanaim, or more, I think all Tanaim, I believe, who say that this pasuk is the most important pasuk in the Torah, right? So there are 5 different versions of this. So one of the more famous is Rabbi Akiva, right? One is et hakeves achat taseh b'boker, that you have to give the korban tamid. Zet toldot ha'adam, right? This is the generations of man from the beginning of Bereshit. And Rabbi Akiva says, again, those are only 3. There are 2 others, but avavta l'recha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'Torah, right? We all know the song v'ahavta l'recha l'recha. Different versions we can sing later, and we'll have a kumsitz in a few minutes. All of us, I'll get the guitar out and we'll go. So v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is zeh klal gadol b'Torah. So how is that? If it really means love thy neighbor as thyself, that you really have to care about other people. Like, how do we know from Rabbi Akiva that can't really be? What do we know about another opinion of Rabbi Akiva? Anybody with some Talmudic?
Water in the desert.
Exactly. So my sister, I fed her the answer, but no, I actually did not. She knows a lot. So thank God. That was not planted, I guarantee you. So yes, exactly. When you only have the famous story of the person brings a bottle of water, he's in the desert, 2 people, what do? They're only enough for 1 person to survive. So one opinion is that I can't cause somebody to die by drinking it myself. So you have to split it, and you hope that Rabbi Akiva says, no, chayecha kodmim, your life takes precedence, and therefore it's sad, it's a tragedy, but you brought the water, it's your water. Why should both of you die? Somebody should live, and chayecha kodmim, when push comes to shove, your life desperate take precedence. So therefore it's impossible to translate this as v'ahavta l'recha, that love thy neighbor as thyself. What it means, and this is what some commentaries point out, and it relates to a pasuk we're going to have a little later. I'll just quote it, it's fine. When it talks about the ger, again, we haven't had a chance to talk. I mean, we could have given this whole class about, and I spend a lot of my time with gerim, with converts. So we have a couple different references to the gerim, and one of them a little later is when it talks about the ger, again, the convert, the stranger. V'ahavta lo kamocha. You love him like yourself. So you see the idea of the lo, and this is what some of the commentators point out, v'ahavta lo kamocha, v'ahavta lereacha kamocha. It's v'ahavta, you should love him because he's like yourself, which means what? He is like you, right? V'ahavta lereacha, or v'ahavta lo, you have to love because you have to add a kaf to it. Ki kamocha, because he's like yourself. That the kaf can be ki kamocha, right? That, what does that mean? That we're all created in Tselem Elokim. So of course we cannot, it's impossible to love everybody like ourselves. We know when it comes to the mitzvot tzedakah, we just talked about as well, that your family takes precedence, and then the aniyei ircha, then the people in your community, and then we broaden it out as the farther away you go. So the closer you are to somebody, that you obviously are going to feel more to that person. That's what the halacha understands. So, but you still have to care for people. Again, hava, we use it in our language, hava, certainly translated love, but hava means like also, right? The Torah, we know that the word hava is used in relationships where it's not a romantic type of relationship. Again, we don't have, we're not going to go into that now. Also, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that describes the different levels of relationships as well. But the bottom line is, Ahava doesn't mean love. doesn't have to mean love. It can mean like. So like you're there, or it can mean love, but again, that's in our romantic type of language, that's not that's a more far-fetched possibility. But we should care. It really means to like, care for people because they're like us, because they're kamocha. We're all created in Tzelem Elokim, and therefore, and just to pick up on the points before, that this is how we're creating a beautiful society. If we care for all people, you can't invest the same thing in a stranger as you do in your family. But if we care about people, if we follow all of and this is why this is the culmination, if we follow all of the mitzvot beforehand, then yes, you're you own a farm, you're leaving food for all the people, strangers, to come in. And this shows that we care about people. And then, so just again, there's obviously a lot more that we could go, but I just want to jump really to the end of the Parsha. It's already late, which is just again, just to really, because it is a nice, almost chiastic type of text that we have here. So where is it? Yeah. So again, we start off with that we have to be kadosh, ki kadosh ani, right? And then we end off v'hit kadishtim v'hitem kedoshim ki ani Hashem Elokechem. Okay, so again, we have this language of the, we saw in Shmini, v'hit kadishtim v'hitem kedoshim, the exact same words here, and then I'm going to skip all of the forbidden relationships, and then at the end of the parsha, and if you remember, just keep in mind what we saw in Shmini. When Shmini, we saw that there was a relationship between kedusha, sanctity, sacredness, and not eating of the shratzim, not eating the creepy things that are on the ground. And here, what do we have here at the end of the parsha? Again, you have this relationship to tuma and tara, talking about food, though, right? So again, we have the Torah here giving us a hint that kedusha relates to food as well, right? That we have to separate between the proper types of animals. Here we add, and again, the same language we saw in Shmini, lo tishaksu, shekets, right? Don't become an abomination, don't become degraded by eating these improper things. So again, here we have animals and birds. In Shmini, it was the direct connection was to the shratzim, the creepy things, but here it's thrown at the end, right? We do have, again, the creepy things. That's going to make you tamei, but you can't be tamei. V'item the kiddoshim, ki kadosh ani Hashem. Again, the ki kadosh ani, it takes place one more time in the Torah, and that's in the following parsha, Emor, right? It also says ki kadosh ani. Those are the only times in the whole Torah we have this language. Again, right? And we're separating you from all people. I think that's really the way that we should end on a post Yom Ha'atzmaut shir, again, that this is the aspiration of the Jewish people to rise to a level of kedusha, that we are separate. That it doesn't mean we're better. That doesn't mean it means that we should aspire to higher. Like I said before, kedusha, if we think about it, is if tahara is about living in this daily world, the mundane things, which of course we should do, and we should live in a state of purity, but we should all at least aspire to the kedusha and to become an am kadosh, to follow these laws. And again, it's not just, it's interpersonal, it's also laws between man and God, right? Because we know that if there's no God in a relationship, the man to man halachat are also going to fall away. If there's nobody that we know that God is the one who commanded us, it's very easy to rationalize not keeping mitzvot between man and man also. It's just about me rationalizing, no, but we know that God commanded not only the mitzvot between us and him, the rituals, but also how to create a beautiful society, a tahor society, and a kadosh society. So.
Okay. Yashikoach, thank you. All right.
Thank you. Yeah. Rabbis Kelman, I thank you. I thank you both. And I now understand how Yitzchak could not tell the difference between the voices of his two sons. Because without looking at you, Rabbis Kelman, your voices are the same.
Okay, yeah, I think we do have, yeah, okay. When I listen to myself, sometimes I tape the deep Torah every week. Sometimes when I hear it, I sometimes think it's my brother, maybe. Yeah, so.
Did you know that I sound like my father? That's people used to confuse me and my father, Alav Shalom, all the time when I would answer the phone, but that's a whole different story. But anyways, okay. But okay, thank you very much. And I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. Of course, my shir tomorrow morning on the Siddur.
I just also just wanted to, you should read, it's a nice comment by Stephen Zaitchik as well. So in the chat. So yeah, go on. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
9:35, yeah, not in the morning, and then Rabbi Leitag, of course, kicks off the week next week, 11:15. Next week we'll have two new sort of classes. Benning Gesundheit is starting a 3-part series on the lead up to Shavuot. That's Thursday morning at 11 a.m. And then next Thursday at 1:15 p.m. just a one-time talk. Mark Trencher, who runs the surveys on the Orthodox community, just put out, I don't know what number, 10th, 11th, your survey does them every couple of years. So this latest one that is just being published, it's like hot off the press, and maybe not even on the press yet, on the singles issue, the singles relationship to the Orthodox Jewish community. So he's going to be talking about that at 1:15 p.m. on Thursday, and then all our regular shiurim during the week, which we hope you'll join, and we hope you'll invite a friend, and we look forward to learning with you. And everybody, Laila Tov and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Wonderful share. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you again, the Almans, a double thank you. And we should have good occasions. We look forward to sponsoring for a bar mitzvah, a wedding, that please God,
Amen.
to celebrate happy occasions. Okay.
Amen.
All right. Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.